Welcome to episode number 345 of the Beyond Social Media Show, the podcast for all of you marketing, advertising, and public relations professionals. You can find us by searching for Beyond Social Media Show. We are recording on April 10, 2021. This week, I am delighted to have with me Pat Lilja, who is a dear friend and a longtime digital marketing guru, expert. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at Pritzker Hageman. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's exactly right.
All right, Pritzker Hageman.
Pritzker Hageman Law Firm,
which is in Minneapolis, specializing in foodborne illness, Legionnaire's disease, explosion injuries, and liability cases. Pat has a long career of identifying, analyzing, rethinking the strategic landscape to help clients' digital presence get in alignment with their goals. He has a long record of helping clients like Target, Ingersoll Rand, Minnesota Public Radio with their digital marketing tools to reach their key audiences and break through the noise. He has extensive knowledge. I know this firsthand. He has extensive knowledge of a lot of things. He's the kind of guy, if Pat knows everything, one of the things that people say about Pat is that Pat knows everything. And he does, but he could also just be bullshitting me and I wouldn't know it because I just assume that he knows everything and what he's telling me is true. So he does have that extensive, wide body of knowledge about a bunch of different things, which is one thing that makes him such a great digital marketer, but also about social communications, online media relations. He has an expertise in data analytics and modeling so that he can provide a positive communications return. He graduated magna cum laude. Is it laude or laud? I never know.
Well, yeah, I think you can take your pick. Whatever is best for your journey to the end of this bio.
Graduated magna cum laude from Gustavus Adolphus College with a BA in political science and psychology, and then also went to the University of Minnesota with majors in computer science and chemistry. So let's start there, Pat. How does your schooling, your college education, how has that
my confused college education,
how has that applied to your career, and was it worth it? Was it
Oh, I definitely think it was worth it. Certainly, as you say, I do have a multitude of interests, and I think some of that comes out in the wide range of majors that I participated in. I did psychology and political science at Gustavus, which is a liberal arts college in Minnesota. Graduated there, and then when I started in those majors, I was kind of thinking law school. And by the time I finished with college at Gustavus, I was thinking medical school, which is why I said, I need some additional prerequisites. Got the chemistry major. And while I was at the university getting that done, I started working at a defense contractor, Hughes Aircraft, and was doing computer work there. So started with the computer science major. And I think all of those put together, I think it's never bad to have a lot of disparate knowledge that you can bring together and synthesize. Yeah. I think that's where new ideas come from. I also think that, at least with the professors I had and the classes I took, some key things that I ended up picking up were, I think, critical thinking and skeptical thinking. The impetus to test things and to not take what might be considered conventional wisdom at face value. I think that certainly the psychology, while much of what I learned in college in psychology has probably been supplanted, it did give me certainly an interest in that area, and psychological principles, especially principles of influence, certainly some of the new ideas that are coming out in neuromarketing fields, in predictive processing, kind of how the brain works. I think that's both important in specific terms in applying and testing marketing ideas, but also I think it's going to be very important in the future. And so I think it's put me along a path both to apply psychological principles in marketing in my past life, and also be thinking about how things might change in the future as maybe more machine learning models, more large language models. I don't know if you've heard of something like GPT-3, but large language models that might be doing writing for us marketers in the future, that might be generating text on the fly based on particular customer or lead personas that is specific to them, how some of these things might be applied. And while some of that is a little bit in the future, I don't think it's as far in the future as you might think.
Wow.
So I got a little bit far afield there.
No, that's all good.
Yeah.
I was just
it's definitely on that.
The political science and psychology focus betrays an interest in human behavior, which is fundamental to your marketing career. So can you talk about political science in particular? I mean, that we will get to our time together at Tunheim, but Tunheim is an agency that did a lot of public affairs work and still does. So how can you talk at all about how that applied, or if not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, political science is social science. I mean, it is certainly an element of social science that takes a lot of what I would say are non-scientific ideas to understand politics, and then tries to overlay various scientific, social scientific principles to test them. And I think back when I took it, it provided a good framework for me to understand how politics worked. And more recently, I think it has, as like Daniel Kahneman and some of the ideas of more rigorous kind of scientific principles have been applied, how people actually think about and interact with politics. I think it's, let me understand that a little better. And that all certainly led into a lot of the work that we did at Tunheim, as you mentioned, in terms of public affairs work, understanding the drivers and motivators that influenced people's opinions. So, I mean, as you well know, and many of your listeners, I'm sure, know, public affairs is really about introducing an idea to people that you'd like them to think about and take action on. And I think without a grounding in drivers and motivators that came from the psychology and political science, I think I might have been content to just put an idea out there and say, this is a good idea. People will see it. And of course, they'll understand it. And, because I've given them good information, they'll take action on it. Mm-hmm. When in actual fact, those aren't the things that are necessarily going to drive anyone who wasn't already a true believer. And so having an understanding of political science and psychology also provides an understanding of how to bring people along with you. I wish more politicians that I agree with understood that.
So I'm fascinated by so you got a degree in computer science because you were working at a defense contractor, but yeah, the combination of all the above, the political science, psychology interest, and degrees, coupled with computer science at a time when those fields converge to make you ideal digital marketer, basically. Having the technology,
Yeah.
understanding of how technology works, understanding of programming and so forth, plus the communications background and consumer behavior background, kind of positioned you perfectly for the career that you have now. Am I accurate in that or no?
No, I think that's very accurate. In fact, while I was at the defense contractor, Hughes, that was the first time I actually saw a web page. I had not read about or seen a web page in the wild, but because we were working with various universities, this would have been, I'm going to guess, 1993 or so. Got to start working with HTML right away. Very basic HTML. And understanding the power of linking between different pages and bringing information together. Also, the interesting thing about where I worked, we weren't producing weapon systems or anything. It was a human factors and training and user interface design group. So we were working, mainly on silicon graphics machines for the user interface and human factors stuff, and then Macs for all of the writing. And I would say the majority of people there were actually psychologists and instructional designers. And some graphics people, and so it was an interesting group to work with. And so that really also helped me combine all of my areas of interest and kind of push me into a digital marketing.
Yeah, so I didn't know that. I didn't know it was the human that was the area of work you focused on at Hughes. I was perfectly positioned. I think I was thinking more like programming, but yeah, interesting.
Well, there's programming too. It was all interface and all of that. So, yeah.
But actual, human factors design. But perfect. You went from Hughes to where?
To a company called Integrated Strategies, briefly, where we did CD-ROM training stuff and worked on some early content on Microsoft Network, which was kind of a competitor to AOL.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. The web still wasn't a thing at that point, as a public thing. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So then you went to Tunheim. How did you end up at Tunheim? Oh
gosh, I was actually applying for it's kind of a weird thing. I was applying for a different job at a local university, St. Catherine's, and originally Tunheim mainly was looking for someone to help with networks and their digital infrastructure, network administration. Again, this was kind of pre-web, but certainly they also needed someone to set up their website and interconnect email and that sort of thing. And so the person who actually got the job at the college I was applying for had been at Tunheim briefly, and I don't remember exactly how it was, but either she or some of the people at the college said, "Oh, you should go apply at Tunheim." So it was just a kind of a happenstance thing. But went over there, and I was there for almost 23 years. And as digital marketing became a thing and became more and more important, that became more and more my focus. And so that's all I was doing at the very end.
So I should say for the audiences, Tunheim is a major public relations, public affairs agency in Minnesota, started by a woman named Kathy Tunheim, who is kind of a legend in Twin Cities here. She started the firm in 1990. So you came in, 5 years maybe after she
Oh,
started.
4 years? Yeah,
4
5 years after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you went from
And
big.
that's where I met you.
It is. We'll get to that. You went from helping them with their technical infrastructure to, as the firm grew and became, the website and everything. So can you kind of how your role changed from beginning till?
Yeah, and I think this is a story that many people might identify with who are who've been in the industry a long time. Digital marketing, wasn't the thing to begin with, and so I guess I kind of fell into it by default initially. When you needed to do something on the internet, when you needed to publish a web page, when you needed to do an email campaign, when you needed to lay email out using HTML, you needed someone with some technical expertise. And when you're working with a lot of different clients, like we were at Tunheim, and very diverse clients, you needed someone who could be close to their needs and understand their needs. And so you needed someone to be on the internal team that was working on it. You couldn't just have some outside person who may or may not be there doing it. So I was that internal person because I had the technical expertise. I had a background in programming, which is still important, but it was both important and rare at the time. And then I also had a background in to some degree in writing, and an interest in the things that our clients were doing, and an interest in developing my skill set over time. And because of that, my time and expertise was needed more and more within the agency. And also, agencies themselves need to do digital marketing for themselves. And so there was always plenty to do with that. That also provided a good opportunity for testing and experimentation. And so it was an interest of mine. It was an interest of Tunheim's to have me do it. And so that's where I ended up.
Yeah. Well, you also have an insatiable curiosity, and you're a quick learner too. I mean, you kind of know how to learn. So you can pick things up really quickly, which is really important in an agency environment too.
Yeah.
So we met I will tell the story about how we met in 2008. Tunheim acquired New School Communications, which is my friend Blois Olson's agency, and I had been working with Blois for a long time. We basically sister companies, his PR, and I did digital, and so I kind of came with the merger, and I was kind of freaked out as we were going into that merger, because Pat was director of East Strategy, and my company was East Strategy, so I'm like, how is this guy going to react to me coming in? And I was really worried about that. And somewhere, actually, some movie, there was a definition of what a gentleman and a lady were. And the movie is Blast from the Past of all movies, but in that movie they defined the definition of a gentleman or a lady as somebody who at all times makes it their mission to ensure that those that are around them are comfortable. And that is about the best definition I can think of for a gentleman. And that's exactly what Pat did. He just absolutely made me at ease, welcomed me, made sure that, I mean, it was all that freaking out was for naught, because Pat was there, and he was there to make sure that I was at home. So that was my first introduction to Pat. And then we started working together, and yeah, I'll let you comment on that.
You're very kind. You're very kind. I tell you, I was so glad to have a kindred spirit to to collaborate with, to conspire with.
Mhm.
And it has been my great pleasure to be your friend since then. I was very happy to be able to work with you, and heck, someday maybe we'll do it again. But I'm just happy to be able to hang out with you when we get a chance too. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Well, when I arrived at Tunheim at that time. What was the name of the virtual online world that was all the rage at that time?
Oh, Second Life.
Second Life. That's
Second
right.
Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was going to be it. Everyone was going to be doing everything on Second Life.
So I was investigating. Second Life at that time and becoming fascinated with it. And Pat, I think you were working on some Second Life project at the time, or the agent had something going on. Times wow.
Yes. So apparently Second Life still exists. I went back at one point to try and log in again using my password from like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And they said they could recover my account. I just needed to give them the credit card number I used to set it up.
20
so
years
I guess
ago?
that's never going to happen.
Credit cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we worked together. We worked together on internal marketing projects, worked together with client marketing projects. But we also did a podcast together.
We did.
Yeah. So,
I was looking through old pictures in a picture book before I left a couple of years ago, and I saw some pictures of us doing the podcast. We had a regular, it looked like a radio desk that we sat at, with like big microphones and
a mixing board.
We were going to do that every day. Yeah, we were going to do an episode every single day.
Yeah, that's the daily numbers.
That was hard. Yes, which you still do. You've kept it up.
But no, that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, and it was hard to show any return on it because there weren't the analytics on what a reach was, right? None of the data that we have now. But yeah, we had a bunch of audio equipment. You did the editing. You did a lot of work on that too. So what did that involve? Because we never had a conversation about that. What did that involve from your end? Because I just showed up and talked.
So it involved a lot of learning Audacity at the time. I'm trying to think back. One of the things that I remember about the editing process, is that it took a long time to remove the ums and the pauses and the.
God, you did that? Wow.
I did it first. No, I did that for like the first few times, and then I said, I can't do this. This will not happen every day. But it was a sweet setup. So we had a multi-channel mixer, and so we'd record separate tracks and add in the music and it was a if nothing else, it was a good way to learn more about audio editing, and to learn that if I that I wouldn't want to do full scale editing of long form content, and how to post a podcast, how to set up the RSS feeds, that sort of thing. So it was a good introduction. But yeah, podcasts when we did it were very niche. Yeah. They were definitely for the nerds.
Which we were.
Which we were. And still are.
That's true. So Tunheim, I left Tunheim in 2012. You left in 2018 to join Pritzker Hageman.
At the end of 2018.
Yeah. So let's talk legal marketing. What? Tell me about
Sure.
Pritzker Hageman and tell me what you do there.
Sure. Well, I should say that it was a big transition. So Pritzker is a personal injury firm, but it's not necessarily the sort of personal injury firm that you would see advertising on television. We do some. We do liability law, so accidents and wrongful death, but we mainly concentrate on complex liability cases. So we don't do things like a slip and fall or something like that. So we're well versed in all types of complex personal injury liability cases, but we have some niche focuses, like you mentioned up front. Fire and explosion injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be where a faulty gas line leaks gas into a house, a faulty appliance hookup leaks gas into a house, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do pathogenic injury. So that is where a bacteria or virus causes someone injury, and there is someone at fault for giving them that disease.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly that's food poisoning. And I'm not talking about like you're sick to your stomach, because of something you ate a couple hours ago. I'm talking about very serious disease that can lead to days, weeks, months of hospitalization, permanent serious injury or death.
Okay.
So certain types of E. coli, listeria, and then Legionnaire's disease, which is a disease where you inhale a particular type of bacteria, and it's very dangerous, and can also cause long-lasting injury, very serious injury. So those are the types of cases that we have specific boutique practice areas in. Then we do practice in the broader areas as well, but that's not our focus.
Okay, so how
and it was a big transition. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how does one contract Legionnaire's disease? Inhaling a bacteria, but where does that?
Yeah, so the primary source of Legionnaire's is aerosolized water. So incorrectly sanitized hot tubs and pools is certainly a source. You'll find outbreaks at resorts, hotels. Another place is if it exists in a water system and a shower or even a sink, water faucet can aerosolize it. So hospitals, you've got older patients who are sick already. They're even more susceptible to it. So you'll find outbreaks in hospitals.
Okay.
And then the cooling towers on top of large industrial buildings that use water for cooling for like air conditioning systems. They can actually grow Legionnaires in those cooling towers, and then it can spread out in a cloud over a community. And yeah. So you can get it from potting soil too, but
wow. All right. So thank you for that. I apologize for interrupting, but you were saying the transition.
Not at all. Yeah. No, I was just going to say that it was a big transition. So Tunheim, I'm working with a lot of marketers and working on a lot of different projects for a lot of different companies. We're doing public affairs. We're doing, of course, a lot of public relations work. I mean, it is a PR, PA communications firm. And honestly, the specific marketing there was mostly digital, and then the whole company is designed around communications. So lots of different projects, lots of different people coming to a law firm and kind of a boutique law firm where I'm doing very specific marketing to a very specific kind of transient personas. Transient as in they become personas when they're made sick, and otherwise they may not share a lot of other characteristics.
Oh, right.
Yep. And working with a small team, but because I don't have an outside client who's hired lots of different people outside of Tunheim to do lots of different things in marketing, sales, and PR, I'm doing everything and I can manage everything, that means that I can test to a much greater degree. I can apply resources to a much greater degree. And so while that diversity of work isn't there, the ability to really try things out and to dig deep into things and to be able to actually have the resources to execute on that is there. And so they both have definitely positive qualities working in marketing, but this is a new thing for me and something that I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, one of the major, as much as I love agency life and the diversity and the day-to-day anything, a bunch of different things are happening. One of the major frustrations is the lack of control over, that, you can design a digital campaign to get people to the landing page of a huge corporation, and you're never ever going to be able to touch that landing page, and it's designed wrong, or there's nothing you can do about it. So all of your work gets that landing page and then stops, and there's a trickle of conversions that come through because the landing page is horrible. So yeah, I get what you're saying. That's awesome. So yeah.
That is a perfect example. Perfect example. Yes.
Yeah. So you have I mean, you're doing it all. What is all?
Well, I do have a team, so I shouldn't say I'm doing it all. Yeah. I luckily can twist the dials and move the levers on everything. Okay. But we do have a couple of writers, and we have a really excellent director of social media, and Lauren McNee. That's critical. When you're writing about complex things like Legionnaire's disease and various types of food poisoning, outbreaks, epidemiology, you need people who also understand those things. And so having that team of people, our writers, Lauren's been there longer than me. Our writers have been there far longer than me. So having that level of knowledge that they bring with them and that they can turn into content is really important. But the things that we're doing, so I would say personal injury legal marketing is different from broader legal marketing in that we are not building up relationships over time or brand building to nearly the extent that a service law firm, someone who's doing, who's charging by the hour, would do. We are finding people in their hour of need, or at some point after their hour of need, but before the statute of limitations runs out on their injury.
That's a needle in a haystack kind of situation, right?
It is. So while we do rely, in some cases, for instance, if there's an outbreak, we might rely on more traditional media relations activities, get the media to talk about us in relationship to a case. Much of what we do is both, search engine marketing. Yep. So, I mean, we do SEO, paid search. We do very targeted Facebook or retargeted Facebook, and some other geo-targeted display advertising. And then content. So, providing people the information they need, the proof points that they need to understand that we're the right attorney for them, and the conversion opportunities. And then providing external proof points. So law journals, our social presence, showing that we, weirdly enough, in legal marketing, you can't say that anyone's an expert. So I will say, I misspoke when I said expertise. I meant experience. A lot of interesting nuances with legal marketing. So providing those proof points, though, through our social channels, through how other people talk about us, through good reviews, good Google reviews, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's it's all, because we're a national practice. I can't say it's like local marketing, but if besides doing, the traditional local marketing things, it's a lot of local marketing type stuff. So, differentiation, proof points, and then really the things that keep me up at night are SEO and SEM.
Yeah. So what are there any regulatory issues you need to deal with in legal marketing?
So many.
Okay.
So every state has their own laws and codes of ethics. So there are laws written into statute, and then there are codes of ethics by local bar associations. And you want to make sure that you are meeting those standards for whatever states that you're operating in. And so you do have to be careful about how you talk about yourself in your advertising, how you label your advertising. But one kind of interesting example is that because of the diversity of codes of ethics, and because of Google's interest in making sure that lawyers remain responsible, you can't do remarketing on Google, for instance. They will not allow law firms to do that.
Wow.
Facebook you can. But so there are some imposed limitations, and there are some regulations that you have to be aware of. So, like for instance, not saying that you're an expert. You can't directly solicit anyone. So certain types of targeting wouldn't be allowed. You wouldn't be able to, an interaction on Facebook couldn't take place without someone indicating their intent to contact an attorney. So there are things to be aware of. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's not as bad as selling if you're a drug manufacturer. It's not as bad as that,
but close.
Yeah.
But
close.
So let's talk. What's your major obsession these days? What are you obsessed about? What's on your mind?
So I mean, I could go into lots of things, but the thing that is the biggest obsession of mine and the biggest frustration of mine are some changes that are going on related to consumer privacy. It's all of these are certainly at least, I should say, ostensibly to the benefit of the consumer. In some cases, I think they really are. And in some cases, I think there may be an additional agenda. I shouldn't say a hidden agenda or something nefarious, but there are some benefits to Google, especially for implementing these privacy changes. So, let me start with Facebook.
Okay. Yeah.
So actually, I'm sure you remember. When we first started doing advertising on Facebook, the ability to target people was so good.
Yeah.
I mean, you could target an individual person almost with advertising. You could target. So Facebook used to integrate a lot of additional consumer data, income, what you've purchased. Do you own a house, a car, a dog? Do you buy pizza? Because they combined all of these external surveys in, and then they allowed super granularity on everything that they knew about you. And that was probably too much from a consumer standpoint. From a marketing standpoint, it was wonderful. And that has been slowly restricted until you can't target that narrowly anymore. That is to the disadvantage of the marketers. Probably at least to the advantage or the perceived advantage to the consumer, but definitely to the advantage of Facebook because you have to spend more money. Certainly all of that happened at the same time that they were reducing the organic placement of posts. So if you followed a company, they started reducing the likelihood that your posts would show up in someone's feed. At the same time, they were reducing targeting opportunities. So they certainly have made a lot of money on it too. I mean, I guess it's 2 wins and a loss there. I just don't like to be on the losing end.
Right.
Google has started to do that more and more now. Yeah, more and more now too. Certainly in legal marketing, it is very important to have a paid presence on Google. It is the most expensive area to advertise on the SERP. There are keywords right now for things, luckily, that we're not interested in, like mesothelioma, that are over $1,000 a click. Although I've seen some things that we've been in at $200 a click. And Google, again, under the kind of umbrella of privacy, has been changing the way you do search advertising. So they, for a long time, have provided the search terms that people use when they click on an ad of yours and when they convert.
Yep.
So that a bunch of people are using this term, I should add it in as a search term. But more importantly, you were able to see, people are using these 37 different terms that are still getting picked up by my keywords. And I don't like those. Those are not good. They're typing in, McDonald's food poisoning in our case. Well, we don't necessarily, people think they have food poisoning because they ate at McDonald's and don't feel good, but they don't convert. They don't turn into good clients. Well, Google has stopped showing the search terms for anything other than very large numbers of searches. So I recently had a campaign with $1,000 of spend in a certain period of time, and they showed me the search terms used for, I think it was like $90 of it, and the rest I don't know. Yeah. So in and of itself, that's bad, but for a marketer. But in conjunction with that, they started more broadly determining synonyms. So, I can have a specific term in brackets. So, it is a specific search term, and Google will match on synonyms that, in my opinion, have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Yeah. I have seen them match on a name of someone that has on the web been associated with particular, in this case, pathogens. But that name is a somewhat generic name. So when people are typing in that name, it is matching on a specific term that I want, and I don't care about that name. Luckily, so many people were doing it that it actually did show up in the search terms. But if not, there could be dozens of examples of that where I'm getting charged. The biggest disadvantage of this is for new marketers or people entering a new field that have not been collecting data over a long period of time. Because those search terms were exposed in the past. People who've been doing marketing for a long time, in Google Ads, have a list of those terms that they can now apply as negative keywords. But new marketers, it's a serious problem. And unfortunately, what it means is that you're spending more than you should to get the people that you want. So anyway, it's not as big a problem for big companies because Google can use machine learning at that point to actually learn about what's a good conversion and what isn't. But when you're a niche marketer who might only have 50 leads, 50 good leads a year, you're not getting that opportunity to train a machine learning model there. So that's what's frustrating me now.
For a good reason.
I'll get over it. We'll find solutions, but it's the latest thing that's got me up at night.
All right. Do you have a legal marketing pro tip or just a general pro tip that you can share with our audience?
Yeah. Lots of negative keywords. No, that's a general one. Keywords, negative keywords are your friend. I do. I would say one thing that kind of a combo thing that I think people don't do nearly enough of, and that is use more headlines in their content. So this might be a cascading tip. While Google claims not to necessarily discriminate against short content, long content does have a better opportunity to explain to Google about what a page is about.
Yep.
But lots of headlines breaking up specific content points provides an even better opportunity to tell Google what a page is about. So lots of headlines. Use schema markup if you're doing FAQs. I don't know if you're doing how-tos. Yep. Use schema on that page. Lots of headlines, and Google has implemented just recently something called passage ranking. And so prior to this year, Google was looking at pages as a whole and using those headlines to determine content that's on that page, and then deciding if it's going to give the whole page to somebody. But this passage ranking update to their algorithm is now grouping pages or page content, rather. So it is looking at passages as their own specific thing, as if they were a page, and so determining whether they are going to show.
So you're talking about chunks of content on a page as a passage of content. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've seen estimates that right now it's, I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 9% of SERP results are now passage rank results. I will say this: I have noticed over the last 4 months, result placement, where you rank on a search engine result is bouncing all over the place too. Yeah. And so I think some of that has to do with passage ranking and them learning or them attempting to learn by sending people to various pages based on passage ranking if they like that page or not. I think that's some of the reason for the volatility, although I don't know that for sure.
So is this passage ranking tied in with the rich snippets where they will give you the answer to the question that you expressed in your search on the search results page, but then also they're deep linking to directly that passage without the webmaster having to do anything to create that link.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, sometimes called zero-click results. Yeah, disparagingly by a lot of people who don't like the loss of traffic because Google's just pulling the stuff and sticking it in Google. You don't get a click to your site. Yeah. Probably. So rich snippets or featured snippets. There was this mysterious drop in featured snippets a few months ago for like 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. The featured snippets almost stopped showing up for some reason. And it was right around when passage ranking started. So there could be some tie in there. It could be that they were just experimenting, sending more people on page, to get more on page results. It could be, who knows? I mean, who knows what they're trying, but the featured snippets came back. Yeah. And the featured snippets are definitely an example of a zero click. Yeah. For something like someone whose intent is to hire an attorney, it's not as big a deal for us because someone's going to click in if they're trying to hire an attorney. Yep. For people who are using, good, well-written, rich content to demonstrate expertise, to build their brand, these zero-click results. I mean, I'd be irritated by it. They're using your content to answer people's questions. They're doing low friction for the searcher, but for the marketer, it's tough because not only do you not get the customer or the potential lead on site, but you're not even getting data on what they're doing or searching. So So anyway, so they may be linked. That may be linked. I don't know for sure though. Certainly.
All right, cool. Well, this has been fantastic, Pat. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. And let me want to ask you how people can get in touch with you if they want to tap into your vast body of knowledge and.
Sure. Well, people can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I think you're putting those links in the show notes. People can email me directly if they want. It's just Pat, P-A-T, at pritzkerlaw.com, PritzkerLaw.com. happy to hear from anyone or talk or, whatever. So thank you, David. This has been absolutely wonderful. I've enjoyed it very much, as I always do when we talk. And I'm just thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And again, thank you. Thanks. This has been episode number 345 of the Beyond Social Media Show. You can find links to Pat and the video and the audio and everything else related to this episode at beyondsocialmediashow.com/345. And next week we'll be back with our regularly scheduled formatting.